maybe I'm being optimistic, but maybe what this could lead to is taking things back to basics with events. You know, the basics of a show looking good and sounding good. You know, it seems to be a really long time since those were the two priorities for an event.
Okay.
It was more about who had the biggest LED screen or the largest mechanical something or other. And maybe this is a really sort of nice reset button that gets things back to the core basics of what makes good entertainment.
Hey everybody, Chris Holder here from AV Asia Pacific Magazine, and welcome to another AV lockdown conversation. Today I'm here with Scott Willsallen, a well-known figure to many of you, audio director and sound designer from his company Auditoria. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you.
I wanted to recall the last time we spoke was at the MCG, and you were finishing up I guess commissioning one of the most significant audio installs the world has ever seen. My times have changed.
Yeah, it was certainly the biggest project we've ever done. Really technically quite challenging, electroacoustically challenging, super rewarding. And we get to kind of relive the whole launch of it all over again on the other side of this current situation we're in.
That's a very glass half full perspective.
Of course.
I guess you could say it's just sort of had the longest soft opening of any stadium PA ever.
Well, the first event we had was the very first time we switched it on with people was day one of Boxing Day test with a near capacity crowd. So you can't ask for a much better inauguration than that. There were then a couple of other smaller scale projects or events, I should say, that occurred in the G before everything stopped. But yeah, it means that we get to have another go at being really excited about what's been achieved.
What was it like on the Boxing Day and hearing the national anthem getting belted out through that PA?
Well, it was, it's not a case of sitting back and going, oh, isn't that lovely? You know, these venues are really complex in the way the different zones interact with one another. And to be honest, most of the time I was there on Boxing Day was spent kind of running from the most sensitive zone to the next most sensitive zone and really fine adjustments of sort of half a dB here or there and trying to understand what effect that has and the difference between where the background noise sits geographically within the venue and how that shifts from pre-game to game time and how the control system needs to account for that within the levels in those different zones. You know, stadiums, we're working in an environment of super narrow dynamic range, far narrower than any other environment I've ever worked in. So, you know, you don't have a lot, it's a very narrow window to work in. So that first day, the first time we had the opportunity of an audience in there, it was a very busy day of understanding how the zones interact.
Yeah, right. Are there lots of projects still kind of being nudged forward, or is the world shut down from your perspective?
We've been really lucky, Chris. We're sort of right at the front end of these projects. Probably 20 or 30% of the projects we do loads of work on never even occur. So by the time it gets down to the point where there are contractors on site pushing speakers out of trucks, there's been a lot of work that's occurred prior to that. Nothing has stopped any of that work from occurring during lockdown. The difference has been normally you're working to some kind of deadline and those deadlines have been pushed. So in some cases, that's meant renegotiating contracts to a different end date so the work gets spread out over a longer period. In other cases, it's meant a complete change in scope because the event that is no longer and it's taking new shape into a new event. So we basically start from scratch. Installation projects, they slow down on site, but it's a great opportunity for the design team to catch up on progress on site. So, we lost quite a few projects right at the beginning. I think like a lot of people, within a few days, 50 or 60% of our workload was either paused or cancelled. But then, within the few days after that, we saw some new projects come along, which would have come along anyway, but it meant we had loads of spare capacity to be able to get involved quite quickly. And they filled a really critical gap for us. We were very lucky. We're lucky in that the way we diversify between big events and installation projects, not necessarily all big installation projects, but the timeframes are different, the lead times are different, the clients are different. That point of difference has meant, we didn't sort of wake up on a Tuesday morning with absolutely nothing to do. So really fortunate from that point of view, and I'm also really lucky that the team I've got were very happy to sort of venture into some areas that we wouldn't normally be doing every day of the week, So that's been credit to them.
What are some examples of that?
Just dealing more with sort of broader signal transport. We deal with signal transport for audio systems of the highest level all the time. And we started to see projects where the signal transport system was doing everything, not just audio. So it's not really a change insofar as the work that's being done, but it is a change in the application to some extent. And then we've always done bits and pieces with show control, but that expanded out to include video show control systems as well. Okay. So again, there was sort of some important learnings along the way, and helpful subcontractors getting involved in specializations. But it's been a really interesting period of time for us to be able to see that the diversification, while sometimes can be a bit of a pain, quite difficult to manage, it's really given us enough work to keep things ticking over.
Sure. Have you been able to maintain your Qantas Chairmans Lounge status, or are you...
I never had that.
How much are you having to travel?
My last flight, I took a brief trip, just holiday a week ago. But prior to that, I hadn't flown for 5 months, which was the longest period of no air travel since 2003. So that's a really long time. And there's a healthy moment of isolation when you're traveling that you start to really appreciate and really enjoy once you start to do it often enough. And then when that's gone away, you don't know how valuable it is, because you didn't travel to be alone or to sort of have some time to do some stuff on your own. You travelled and that just happened to be a byproduct of it. But that byproduct is really important for mental health.
Yeah, it's interesting because just about everybody else I've spoken to will be saying, you know what, I haven't travelled in 5 months. Oh, it's been amazing. I've been able to get to know the cat again. Yeah. And I've done some jobs around the house.
Yeah.
No one said, I really miss travelling because I get to... But, that's an interesting byproduct of what you do, and I guess the headspace you need to be in, to get your best work done.
There's also an element of, when I'm travelling somewhere, I'm usually travelling to meet up with a team of people that I've been working with for a while. And, yes, they're colleagues, but they're also friends. And you sit in a workshop and you discuss difficult topics where there's competing demands and priorities. And then at the end of that day, you all go out for a meal together and you have a really great time. And that kind of process of being challenged mentally and intellectually is really healthy and really fun. And then to sort of have a beer with these people in the evening and sort of talk about their families and what they're up to, and it's really important stuff. And when that goes away, the professional side's the obvious thing, but that personal interaction that also comes with it, you really miss that.
Yeah. and that's unlikely to come back anytime soon, or it feels.
I don't know. I know there's plenty of people that will say this sort of working like this, over conference calls and stuff, will replace vast numbers of meetings and things like that. And to an extent, I agree. But it's also highlighted just how unproductive this form of communication is on topics that are less defined. So creative workshops that we'll spend a week in Dubai covering a load of topics, they're super productive, and you come out the other end knowing exactly where things are at. You can't replicate that on a video call. It just does not work.
That's interesting.
And we've tried. We've certainly tried. The things haven't sat still for the last 4 months. We've certainly tried, and it just doesn't work.
Is it?
So I'm confident as soon as. Sorry, say again.
What's it down to? Is it? Have you kind of thought about what's missing?
I think it's the time domain. I think it's the fact that things are very slightly delayed, and you miss the nuances of conversation and communication. You can't quickly scribble something and have someone lean over your shoulder and there's a speed, or there's a pace, I should say, that those developmental conversations occur at, that this medium just doesn't keep up with.
Right. So it's this kind of multi-threaded kind of conversations where one thing feeds another, which feeds another, and that's hard to hard to.
I think this works really well with meetings that have an agenda.
Yeah, it's great for control freaks.
Totally.
So can I ask, whether you can tell me specifically or not? It doesn't really matter, but what are some of those projects that have been able to be pushed forward? Are they because what is it down to something? Is there something in common with those projects?
Yeah. Now that I think about it, previous investment.
Okay.
They've gone too far for it not to happen.
Yep.
Yeah. There's too much has happened for it to not occur.
Okay.
Too many people and organisations are too far invested financially, culturally, emotionally, energetically. There's too much in it now.
Are you?
I think that's the comment.
Yeah. I guess part of the answer I was wondering about whether there's a certain mentality or a certain sector that is keen to not waste a crisis and almost take advantage of the crisis.
I mean, I'm not so sure. I can't really identify with those words. That sounds a little bit too ambulance chasing.
Sure, but if there's, I guess, look, I won't pursue that. I don't think I have anything specifically in mind.
Okay.
But I guess let's take the opposite. What happened with the World Expo?
I can't talk about it too much because of our involvement. But if we look at what's in the public domain, it's very clear the event is still happening. The shape of the event will change to some extent to suit whatever the distancing requirements, or whatever the look. Major international events, they're in a situation where they have to lead the world on these new things. Whether it's back in the day, it was about health and safety and making sure everyone got home safe at night. The new focus now is obvious. These events can't not happen because there's a desire for them to still happen. And look, if we starve people if we starve society of its cultural experience, then society will just build its own. and maybe there's some of that happening, and that's a good thing. You know, there's I don't think there's an opportunistic element in this from any company, or, you know, the moment this happened, there were loads of companies advertising for streaming services, and it's like, that's a good thing, because that's simply following a need.
Sure.
And I guess need is the mother of invention. So out the other side of this, there's still going to be a need for the same kind of cultural experiences that people had prior to this. For public events or anything sort of high profile, it has to be right at the front edge of following whatever the new rules are. And there'll be some really clever ideas that come along, and probably some really bad ones as well. Yeah. That think of ways of embracing those that still give people the quality of experience that is aimed for. Maybe, and maybe I'm being optimistic, but maybe what this could lead to is taking things back to basics with events. You know, the basics of a show looking good and sounding good. You know, it seems to be a really long time since those were the two priorities for an event. Okay. It was more about who had the biggest LED screen or the largest mechanical something or other. And maybe this is a really sort of nice reset button that gets things back to the core basics of what makes good entertainment.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. Maybe that's just a budget grab from my point of view.
Yeah, but it is interesting, and obviously something like an Olympics can't go ahead, and a World Expo can perhaps go ahead in some shape or form, but with these big events, there is, I guess, a varying degree in which how successfully it can do it in real life and how successfully it can do it virtually.
It depends what you call success, doesn't it? If it's based on ticket sales, then that's a very simple mathematical outcome as to whether it was successful or not. If you judge an Olympic Games that way, then it's been the biggest failure in entertainment history. But then when you look at everything else that comes with hosting an Olympic Games, you know, maybe it does all add up. Expo, perhaps it's not about visitation. Perhaps it's about presenting a new perspective on the UAE to the world. Perhaps it's about another way of having different countries that don't easily communicate, you know, in the one place at the one time.
Sure.
I don't know. I guess it depends what you call success.
Yeah. Is there, can you observe any technologies in your world that are going to get like a real shot in the arm because of COVID, or a higher priority or more focus, or like even you mentioned, you know, sort of some of your priorities have changed a bit during the lockdown as far as you moving into different areas. Can you see any trends happening?
It's interesting. Not a single one. But what it has done is provided us with a really good opportunity to slow things down a little bit in procurement processes, which has enabled us to introduce, and we're working on a couple of projects now where this has actually become part of the procurement process, where the environmental cost, in terms of the carbon cost of an event, has become an input into a number, a numerical input. So company X provides quote at 100. There's a spreadsheet they have to fill out that gives us a total carbon cost. Carbon cost gets added to their quote, and that's the number that they're assessed by. So what it has given us time to be able to do is to slow things down enough so that the environmental effects of these events can be better understood, and choices can be made to minimise or at least acknowledge. And it's the first step of many to hopefully being better at making sustainability are not just a talking point and a form to fill out in a tender response, but actually part of an evaluation.
So what does that mean for you?
Well, all it means for us really is we're given the opportunity to present this as a priority, where, for a lot of the businesses that we're doing work with, they have their period of time where they're doing a load of contracts and then they kind of go away again and disappear for a while. We're regularly involved in loads of them, so it's an opportunity for us to say we think this should become the new normal, and this is something that we as a consultant working on these projects, we believe this is something that we should care about. And if we're serious about the sustainability in the sort of the mission statement of the event, then this is how we back that up. And then then we also on our side of the fence need to be careful about our own. So why do we need to fly those guys from Sydney to wherever to do that event? Can we find someone closer? So there's two sides to that coin.
Yep. But if you go to one of your, say, normal big PA kind of partners like an L Acoustics or a D&B, and you say to them, hey, this is a big deal now, what does it practically mean? Like, how do they respond?
It's not for them, because they're already being pushed really well by the EU. And that's progressive. So every year things get tighter, and their focus has to be following the rules within the jurisdiction they operate. From our point of view, that's very small in terms of its impact compared to the impact of an event. Compared to flying 4 jets full of loudspeakers and lights across a continent to do a gig because it was confirmed last minute. Sometimes there's no option but to do that. It's just about acknowledging what that cost, financially and environmentally.
Because would you say that in the past, a lot of these events, it ends up being, success at any cost, whether it's, financial or environmental?
Yep, absolutely. Do whatever it takes. We'll just keep throwing money at it until it's solved. And we're all in the business of solving problems. That's why we got into this game. It certainly wasn't for the money. So, if someone presents us with a problem, it's like Christmas.
Yep. So you're quite chipper about, having the environmental sort of, I guess, it's a big lever that is now needs to be addressed. It's something that is constantly in the mix.
It needs to become tactile. It needs to become a real thing. Having a statement isn't enough. It needs to become
a number,
part of the cost. It needs to be part of the evaluation, not a cursory, statement that doesn't actually feed in any way. But it's small steps, isn't it? It has to start somewhere, and I think there are certain rental companies, certain event producers that are better at it than others, but it's just steps, isn't it? And eventually everyone takes a step in the right direction, and then we're all better off, and then it's another step, and then it's another step. So.
Are there any other observations about having this kind of hiatus where, have you seen any other this momentum prior to COVID where you could see things just maybe getting just increasingly mental or increasingly kind of this head of steam up that, you either you hop on to that train or you just got to check out, and then having this sort of, amazing worldwide sort of clapper being shut, and it's like, what other things have just sort of, you've reflected on, God, actually, if that stops or slows down, that's not a bad thing. For me,
I don't think it's fair. I mean, we can look at developing nations that are throwing whatever they can at creating events and creating their nation as a destination for events. It's easy for us, with our new sustainability hats on that we only bought 2 weeks ago, to decide that that's not sustainable. But it's no worse than, in fact, I would dare say what we were doing 20 years ago is far worse.
Can you identify when big events became consolidated into virtually like a one sort of international crew, and why that's lasted so long, and whether that's good for the industry, or whether you kind of exist sort of in a different stratosphere, and there's no trickle-down benefit?
There's a few questions in there. The first one, or the first part, it all began in Sydney 2000, really. There's some little sort of foreshadowing that occurred a little before that, but really it's Sydney and on. Sydney 2000, Rugby World Cup 2003, Athens 2004, and then it kind of built. It's those key companies. It's the David Atkins Enterprises, which sort of, delivered Sydney 2000, delivered Doha 2006. The Jack Mortons of the world delivered Athens 2004, Manchester 2002 as well, I think, and then on, all the Commonwealth Games since, just about. Is it a good or a bad thing? It doesn't matter, More recently, Five Currents, more recently BWS as well. Well, actually, since 2006, when the early stages of those businesses. I don't think it's a good or a bad thing. I mean, I think it's simply a case of there aren't that many events. There can't be 20 different producers for events like that, because each of them would only have done one. Doesn't make sense, This is track record. This is a very risky decision that a country is making when they decide who's going to produce the event that rebrands their future to the world. Who would you choose,
I choose you, Swar.
Just the sound guy.
Like, it would be a limited event, but it'd be awesome. Great sound. Yeah. Hey, that's that it is. I think it is interesting that there is this sort of global kind of traveling circus of the ultimate events globally, and that the people involved it's from a very sort of small kind of gene pool, and I understand why. I'm not saying it's good or bad either. I just think it's a fascinating world to be involved in.
Small but evolving. So every time we do another gig, there's plenty of friendly faces, but there's a load of fresh faces as well.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
As far as the trickle down, there's a few pretty well-known suppliers that are able to do certain gigs because they've done those larger projects. It gears them up. Norwest would use a major event to enable them to replace all their consoles or buy a new PA. The kind of financial outlay that's really difficult and risky becomes less risky when you can pay off a third of it from one gig. Now, that gig might mean the kit's out of action for 8 months, but it's a good result. That stuff then comes home. That then refreshes the premium, the top end of those rental companies, and that equipment might get on sold, and then other companies get access to kit they otherwise wouldn't. So is there a trickle down? There is, in terms of good quality equipment availability at all levels of production. The skills, those same people that were working in any one of those events we were talking about, they're also working on other jobs, because you can't just live off one gig every 2 years. And so their experience of that project becomes something part of a conversation, and other people learn from that.
Yeah, cool. Hey, let's end it there. Thanks so much for your time.
We didn't even get to the tricky stuff.
Oh, did I not actually start to get the knitting needle out and find out what's really makes things tick? I've balked the like. Have you started learning guitar?
No, I play drums. Don't ask me that.
But you can't play drums in London.
No. There's probably quite a few London-based drummers that would beg to differ.
Yeah, but you might need your own rehearsal studio, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's true.